Kish Rafique, welcome to the Anatomy and Clay Learning System podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it. And I feel like we have a little news headline, as a matter of fact, as you come on, because on Twitter, I spotted that you were just nominated as Teacher of the Year by the Falls Church City Public Schools Foundation. Do I have that correct?
Yes,
Something like that?
that's correct. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So I take it there's a nonprofit that supports the school district, and that's where you got the nomination.
Yes, so it's a foundation that funds a bunch of things, including the Anatomy and Clay, but it's a
Ah,
foundation that looks at any needs that the school budget can't fulfill or there is no money for in the regular school budget that we get through the state or through taxpayer money. They look for a need, and one of the things they do every year, which is so delightful, is they give a monetary reward for whoever ends up getting the Teacher of the Year. And there's like a board that goes through all the nominees, and then it's a very prestigious process, and then they determine who is going to be the Teacher of the Year, and then there's like Administrator of the Year, Paraprofessional Staff of the Year, and so forth.
fantastic. Do you know how many others have been nominated?
I believe in the teacher category it was about like 10 of us,
Okay. Yep. Yep. Very
and that
good.
includes the elementary school, middle school, high school. Yeah.
Nice. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so
Very
much.
cool. Well, tell us a little bit about your school, Meridian High School. It's an International Baccalaureate School, and you're in Falls Church, Virginia, just not too far outside Washington, D.C., correct?
Yeah, about 12 minutes. 12 minutes
Okay.
outside DC.
Yeah, tell us about your school.
Well, it's a great school. It is an IB premier school, where we believe IB for all. And it is a school predominantly, it is an affluent school. We have about less than, if I remember when I looked at the school profile, it's something less than like 3% of students on free or reduced lunch, if that's the criterion that we're looking at.
Yeah.
It is a school with predominantly high achieving students, but also a school that has supports for students that have accommodations or are part of the special education program. But it's a really great place to work, very positive. And we have a brand new building. It's 5 stories, and every time we have visitors who come in, especially when we have sports, like any sporting events, and we have students come from other schools, it's always nice to hear they're like, wow, this looks like a college campus. Um, but yeah, it's a really great place to work with awesome people and just, so much support and resources for just phenomenal student learning.
Yeah, I went online and looked at the photo of the building. It's quite spectacular, I must say.
Yes, it's great. It's absolutely great. There's so much light that comes in. We have a vivarium where we're growing all sorts of like vegetables and flowers, and we have a fish room where we have different types of fish. It's phenomenal.
That's great. Well, give us a little background on yourself. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? How did you get into what you're doing today?
So I actually grew up actually not too far from Falls Church City. I grew up in Falls Church, Virginia, just not in Falls Church City. It's really weird to explain that to people, but there's Fairfax County, and then there are city schools. So Fairfax County is a neighboring school district, and I went to Fairfax County, grew up in Falls Church. I went to school in Alexandria, Virginia. I went to Virginia Tech. I also went to George Mason University, and now I'm back at Virginia Tech. I started off into medical technologies and oncology research. Very quickly learned that it was very depressing, and of course it was very depressing, but also I was not introvert enough for that career, because you're just in a cubicle counting cancer cells, writing research, doing reports, and then also looking at technologies that can help better cancer screenings. And I had this opportunity from my professor for microbiology who said, hey, my niece teaches at the school. She has to get back surgery, and she is really looking for a really good sub because her kids are great and she doesn't want to just put anyone in there, but they need to have basic biology background. And I said, no way, are you kidding me? 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, that scares me. It's not my thing. They're like, please, please, you're the only one I can think of. You'd be owing me big time. So I did it as a favor to my professor, went in. The gig was supposed to be like 4 weeks, somehow ended up being 5 months. And it was like the best 5 months of my life. Just teaching biology, getting to know students, watching their brains grow. And I quit my job. I went back to school. I got my master's in education and curriculum. And I knew that I wanted to see students get happy about science. And I think the best part for me was just seeing them be able to say, wow, I never liked science and I love it. And I think that is the most rewarding thing.
That's great. Wow. What was science always a thread for you coming up through school?
Actually, no, I was not blessed with very good science teachers. I went into college as an accounting major because I was very good at math. I went in as an accounting major and then I switched to medical technologies and cancer research because I was just good at it, science. And I figured, okay, I like research. I'm good at this. Why not just go for this? Um, but I didn't have that educator motivation or educator role model in my life really to go into science. So I'm actually really grateful for that one professor sending me that email. I would not be where I am today without him pushing me into the world of education.
And how long ago was that? How long have you been teaching now?
Well, let's see. This question always shocks me. I would say 8 years now. Yeah,
Wow.
so 6 years at Meridian, and before then I was doing student teaching. Yeah, so 8 years.
Yeah. Does that feel the whole cancer research just feel like another life, another,
Oh yeah.
like it happened to
That
somebody else?
working in emergency rooms, being a scribe, working out of Washington, D.C., yeah, being in trauma centers. Yeah, it's great because I can really talk about that time when in the classes I teach now, even with my oncology research. Um, but it's a completely different life in the best way possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thread we need to kind of catch up on before we get into anatomy and clay is just your wrestling coach work. And it looks like either the season was just wrapping up with a big tournament based on, again, what I could see on social media. Um, so tell us about how you got into that side of your school world.
So, I have phenomenal colleagues, and I had a colleague named Jason Perkins. He taught earth science, and I co-taught a few astronomy courses with him. And he was appointed the head coach. He came to me. I've had a combative sport background ever since I was like 5 years old, and I guess it's hard to miss because I have a very feisty personality. But he reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I think." It was really he was the one who led this operation. But Jason said to me, Kish, I think that if females or girls see a female coach, they might want to wrestle. And I said, I totally understand, but my plate is full right now. Um, and he asked again and he asked again. And I said, how about this? If you don't find another assistant coach by the end of the month, I'll do it. And I don't think he even looked. He just told me he did not find anyone else. And I came on board, and truth be told, whatever he said, it came true. We had that first year, we had 4 girls show up, and their real motivations were like, we heard there was a female coach on staff. Our numbers also just doubled in the males. We normally had less than 20 students on the roster, and we had 45 my first year, and it was amazing. So that's really how it started. And then when I realized the politics and the issues in the state of Virginia with female wrestling, that's what really made me stay in it because, of course, with my anatomy background, I just noticed my females being these phenomenal wrestlers and they wouldn't be winning matches because they were outnumbered by just mere anatomy, right? So I would try to look for other schools and email other coaches and say, do you have a girl on your team? Do you have a girl on your team? And I would look for other females, and turns out there were a bunch of them, but there was no opportunity for them to actually be in a tournament or in a match together. So our school became the squeaky wheels of this operation on why is female wrestling not recognized in the state of Virginia. And we went through a lot of legalities. We got school board involved. Our superintendent, who is phenomenal, he backed us up all the way. Because we are pioneers in so many ways. We're such a progressive school district. He was like, "You have my full support. Our female wrestlers deserve that opportunity." So really, it became almost a female empowerment movement for me, to make sure my female wrestlers, who are such great athletes, to get that same opportunity that my male athletes were getting. So last year, with some help of the press, and we got some news coverage for being the first school district in the state of Virginia to pass a resolution unanimously to sanction female wrestling in the state. And since then, our numbers have quadrupled in the state.
Wow.
So really, I'm more involved with the female wrestling, just because I saw a niche and I wanted to help fill it.
Wow. So is it recognized now in the state as part of the official sports?
We are in so from my understanding, in order to be fully sanctioned, you have 3 years. You go through an emerging sports status, kind of like what happened with esports in the mid 2000s. Same idea. You have to show evidence and data that this sport can be sanctioned. Because I understand the bureaucracy and I also understand Title IX, right? If the male athletes are getting an opportunity, the female athletes need it, which requires money and budgeting. So I totally understand why they need the 3 years, but we're in our second year. And if our numbers keep growing, next year it'll be recognized as a fully sanctioned sport.
Fantastic. Wow. Congratulations on that as well. Can you talk a little bit more about just the overlap and what you meant by how anatomy plays a role? Can you just talk a little bit more about that? And what do you talk with your wrestlers, your female wrestlers about in terms of that?
So, really, in the beginning, it was like a lot of waterworks, rightfully so. It's a fight, girls learning to go and defend themselves, and I think for anyone, not just females, when you're first starting off in a combative sport, it is almost an out of body experience because you're like, whoa, this person touched me. But I think for my female athletes, it was a little bit more different because they're like, I learned this in the wrestling room. I know the technique. I know the counter. I know how to defend myself. But why is this not working? And to explain to them that your competitor, your opponent, has more muscle mass and is stronger than you. And even if you have the technique and talent, and you don't have the strength and you don't have that endurance. But we would talk about other stuff. Like what you do have is the knowledge, but you also have flexibility. So we would talk about male anatomy versus female anatomy and what you could use to your advantage. If you're on bottom and you're trying to get out, you can actually squeeze out because you're more flexible. So we would talk about stuff like that. It is, and I think my colleagues, my male coaches would agree that coaching the females is really different from coaching the males. Technique can be the same, but with females, it definitely requires a bit more of talking about that empowerment piece, right? Like you can still do it. I've seen females go in and be complete badasses and get these boys to humble themselves. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And also I've recognized it now in the males too, is where they will recognize the females like, oh, she's a really good wrestler. Even just at Girls States this past weekend, I would say 70% of the crowd were males, dads, brothers, other male wrestlers that probably practiced with the girls all season and wanted to come watch them perform. So it is really nice to see that as well. So it's definitely twofold, right? It's part of it is like the anatomy is not there, even if you have the technique. So what can I do for you? I just want to level the playing field for you. I can't fix the anatomy thing, but I can level the playing field, and that is to get you opportunities to wrestle other females.
Wow, that's great. And I don't really know is how much are your females wrestling males versus wrestling other females?
I would say still there are way more. I would say 75% of the tournaments and matches they go to, they're wrestling males. And 25% are females. And
Yeah.
and I definitely give my female wrestlers a choice. If you don't want to wrestle boys, I'm totally okay with that. Just know that you won't have enough match experience because I can only get you so many opportunities because there are only so many opportunities available for us to qualify for those female only tournaments.
Yep. And they qualify at the same weight level, correct? Is that's the determining factor?
And that's the other, I'm glad you brought that up. The weights are actually different in the females versus the males. Like just to give you an example, it's 106 in the males, it's 107 in the females. It's not a huge difference. However, the weight management piece, that was another like anatomy challenge, right? Is that girls have to be on weight and they have to understand that their body carries water weight differently than their male wrestlers. Where
Ah,
for male wrestlers, it was easy for them to say, okay, I'm going to cut carbs this week because I'm 4 pounds over, or I'm going to, put on my sweatshirt, jump rope, get a good amount of cardio in. I need to cut a few pounds here and there. Or they can indulge a little bit more during Thanksgiving and Christmas because wrestling is a winter sport. But my females didn't notice that. My females noticed, Coach, it's not going down. My weight's not going down. And it's also the talk about hormones, right? Your hormones are working differently. Your endocrine system works differently. The way that water weight supports females versus males. So this is the route you should take, and this is the route males should take. The other good thing is there's something called um, the Madison weight scale, which instead of forcing a female to be exactly 144 pounds, it'll say you could be between 144 and 147. So in the beginning, when we were first starting the sanctioning process, a lot of tournaments would do the Madison weight scales where you could be within a range. But as we're trying to push to be sanctioned and recognized as a real sport, they've moved away from that. So it
yeah.
gave our girls definitely an opportunity to learn how to maintain their weight. But it is tricky, right? There's
Yeah.
definitely anatomical challenge there for sure.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. Do you have any female wrestlers who are also in your anatomy classes?
Yes.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. So this year I had two, but every year I at least have one or two. And I
Yeah.
think that's how I actually get them into wrestling too. I'm like, you should do it. It'd be really good for you. If it doesn't do anything for you in the sport and if you don't win, it'll build you grit that you cannot build in any other sport, I think.
Mhm.
And I think it's one of the few sports where yes, it's a team sport, but it's individual enough to where humility teaches you a lot. And I think at this
Yeah.
age, humility is so important, and also just that discipline is so important. And I always tell my wrestlers this is that's going to take you later on in life. And while those challenges may be still challenging, they won't be as bad as opposed to someone who's never had to grow their grit like you did.
Yep. Yep. Well, take us to the classroom. What classes do you teach?
So I teach human anatomy and physiology. I have two sections of that, fully loaded, very popular class. I'm pushing for, I'm writing a proposal to make it a 2-year course. Um, so I can get through more body systems. But in addition to that, I also teach IB biology, both year 1 and year 2, the higher level.
Wow. Is that juniors and seniors typically the IB?
Yes, and also a human anatomy tends to be juniors and seniors as well.
Okay, gotcha. And where does the anatomy and clay come in the flow of your instruction?
Um, it really definitely starts with the skeletal system. Just learning the different bones, but what really takes it off is the muscle system.
Hmm.
Um, and students being able to take the clay, build it with their bare hands. But then also before they build it, I'm like, feel it, feel the muscle. What does it feel like? Does it feel flat? Does it feel like it has a point? Does it feel cylinder? Like, how does it feel? Which way are you moving that muscle? So one of the first muscles we built were the rotator cuff. And I asked them to show me. We do like a movement class almost, right? Show me the different ways that you move the muscles of the rotator cuff. And then you see some students just, putting their hand up, and then some, move going in the spiral, some just going like this. You see adduction and abduction. You see curls and the flexing and extending. You see it all. And I asked them to use words to describe those movements. What are those? Which way are those muscles moving? And then we try to think about, okay, if shape determines the function, if anatomy determines the physiology, what might this muscle look like? And then we just brainstorm words. Oh, it has to be flat, right? Because it's going this way, or it must be long because you have to flex it. And they start saying these words. I'm like, okay, let's look at it. Let's look at it in the atlas. And then it turns into kind of a competition, like I was right, it was long, I was right. And then they get to actually build it. So that's how it's really been introduced. And it's really my first year doing it. And I know it's going to just grow and get bigger and better. But this year, I was actually really impressed with how impressed the students were. I really thought I was very nervous. I'm like, are these kids going to think this is art class now? We're no longer in science. But
Yeah.
their reaction really took me aback, and it made me realize, wow, they're actually learning, like truly learning and not regurgitating, right? They're actually learning. And I got a little emotional, I'm not gonna lie. I definitely got a little emotional for the first class that I taught because I just saw the kids like deer in headlights, like, oh my goodness, something different is happening in my brain.
Hmm.
Yeah, that
And
was
so
nice.
this is the first year you've implemented it.
Yes, and it's so much different than what I would do in previous years. In previous years, we would do a few dissections, which are great. I have some ready-made models and I can point to those or show pictures and videos. We would still do the movement stuff, but it's not the same if they can't build what they're brainstorming.
Yeah.
So that's definitely like I've used Play-Doh in the past to like teach about the different tissues of the human body when we go through histology and we build cuboidal cells and columnar cells. And that's great. And the kids definitely love it. But I think this is so much more different is because they can build it on their model, but then they know they have it too. And they can check. I'm like, which way do you think the muscle fiber should be going? They're like, well, it's going like this, so it has to go superior to inferior. And they say it themselves. Like it's very little teaching that I'm doing, because it's very inquiry based. And their inquiry normally gets them to the right place. And I think that's the magic of it, is inquiry requires a lot of patience and a lot of wrong answers in the room. But this is the one time I've done student inquiry based hands-on learning, and there's not a lot of wrong answers. That's because they're so self-aware of what their body has and how they're moving, um, that they're able to make inferences that are actually pretty accurate.
Wow, that it really sounds like a very useful approach. And I haven't quite, even though I have not heard that quite that, let's just feel it first and then let's have some conjecture about how that must look in there. I've got to say, you picked a very complex structure with the rotator cuff. Yeah, not
I
your
think my
straightforward.
rotator cuff was hurting from wrestling, so I was like,
Yeah.
let's do the rotator cuff today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure they come to appreciate how much is actually going on in the shoulder.
Oh yeah, and how intricate it is. And they were like, wait, there's four muscles of the rotator cuff? I thought there were only two. But then also like pronouncing the muscle names, right? Being able to say like supra and all these words I never said, like supraspinatus. Whoa,
Yeah.
sounds like a
Yeah.
dinosaur. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it is. I think that's the other part of I love it too. Like normally, these in my human anatomy students are not typically the full IB diploma, high achieving students. They're very much the students who want to learn, but want to pick the path of least resistance to get through high school, whatever their end game may be, if whether it's college or not.
Yeah.
But typically it's the students that need that inquiry and hands-on learning. So when they see that they can say a muscle name with 15 letters in it, that makes me really happy because they're like, wow,
Yeah.
I never thought I could learn these kind of words in a science class, and they learn them.
That's great. So you said they're fully loaded classes. Can you give me a picture of how many students that is? And are you having do you have a model for each student? Are you sharing models?
I have, we purchased, I'm gonna get more next year. We purchased 14 models, and I have 6 to 8 groups of 3. So in one class, I have 8 groups of 3, and the other class, I have 6 groups of 3. I've noticed 3 works really well 4, I think, is a little pushing it.
Yeah.
3 works really well because I have one kid who's like molding the clay. I have another kid who's like looking at the atlas and saying, hey, the tendon, this is the origin, this is the insertion. And then I have another kid who is actually building the muscle, and then they switch.
Yeah.
And then the next
Yeah.
kid does it. The
Nice.
other nice thing is, again, I'm very grateful for our phenomenal building. I have an Aver camera on my ceiling, and it has the zoom like you won't believe. Like if it zooms in to my forehead, you can see my pores. It's insane. And
Yeah.
it's very heavily saturated. What I do is I have that camera hooked up to the screen behind me, and I'm building the model in the front, and the camera zooms in. And so if they have doubts, they look at the screen, um, and I'm able to move my model around. Because my room is very long, that way students don't feel like, oh, they're not getting that one-on-one. So the students in the front, they don't have to look into the screen. But the students in the back, they don't get that same. In order, again, to make sure all the students have the same accommodation, I turn on the camera so they can see what I'm doing. So that has been a huge success. That camera originally, it's mind blowing. Everything happens for a reason, but the camera originally was there when we went to remote learning. So if teachers
Ah.
wanted to teach from their classroom, because it was easier, especially for science teachers, because all of our stuff is there. Those cameras originally were there for teaching. But it worked out because I'm probably one of the few people in the building that's still using the Aver camera.
That's great. Wow. Nice. Really, really cool. I bet you kind of wish you had something like anatomy and clay maybe when you were going through college and learning anatomy.
Oh yeah, maybe not even college because I took human anatomy in high school. I will
Ah,
say I will give this teacher a plug. This teacher was a very difficult teacher, but man, did she motivate you to learn everything.
uh-huh.
I forget her. I forgot most of my teachers, but Miss Meinhold taught me so much about it was just anatomy. There's no physiology, so it was just gross anatomy. But that was I think I would like to say that was the first seed. And it wasn't as cool as anatomy and clay, but the information was great, and I really did love the content. Even though I didn't think I was going to pursue it later in life, but it is interesting how that came full circle. It's my favorite class in high school, is my favorite class to teach in high school now.
That's great. Well, just as we kind of wrap up here, just and also to bring it kind of full circle, the foundation recognizing wonderful teachers, but also maybe just, I mean, you have to appreciate the fact that the foundation is out there filling the gaps. And of course, we all wish, at least I can say, I wish public school budgets took care of absolutely every need that a public school teacher might dream up. But that's not the case in any state that I know of. And it is wonderful that there are foundations out there that are helping with those resource gaps as they come up.
It's phenomenal. I mean, when I was the the chair of the board of the foundation, her name is Suzanne. And Suzanne was even my application and the grant I wrote, there were so many things that were unclear because I didn't even know how I was going to use anatomy and clay. So I was like, okay, I think I'm going to use it like this, and I think I'm going to use it like this. But you don't really know what it's going to be like until it shows up, and then you look at your curriculum, and you're like, how can I merge these? Um, but she went so above and beyond that she told me, she's like, hey, you could change your grant to say a little bit more this rather than this, so it's more student inquiry based, and that way we can get you more money.
Ah,
Like, it was just her support has been so phenomenal because she says, I see what you're trying to do here, and I think this is going to be great for these students, but I want to make sure I can optimize it and get you the best kit possible. Which I thought was such a big deal because here I was writing this application, like, sweating, is this going to get approved? Am I going to get this grant? And it's really a very interesting experience because when you actually get approved for the grant, they don't tell you via email. They just pop up in your classroom, and all the board members show up and the superintendent
wow.
shows up, and they bring you a plant, and then they say, surprise, your grant has been accepted. And they give you your paper, you take photos, and they're so excited. So it's a interesting experience to find out that your grant was actually approved. So yeah, that they've just been so vital in the extracurricular learning that's happening, where I feel like we call it extracurricular because it's not part of the budget, but that's truly where the learning is happening. And they've done some amazing work. And I've even been told that this can continue to grow. If we need to get more models, we will. If you think this should go from 3 students to every 2 students, we're willing to support that. So again, that's the kind of encouragement any educator needs. And so the definitely the foundation was the backing for this entire thing. They're the true
Yeah,
motivators to help me say, yes, I can do this.
absolutely terrific. Well, Kish, thank you so much for your time today. Congratulations again on your nomination. We'll watch on social media what happens to that and keep track. And thank you for posting some, yeah, thank you for posting pictures that actually led us to you. Appreciate that. And again, thanks so much for your time today.
Of course. Thank you so much.